Just when you think you're getting the hang of German sentences, you stumble upon ones with 2, 3, or even 4 verbs crammed together at the end of the sentence. What on earth is going on here? And how do you make sense of it all without losing your mind? Well, that's exactly what we're going to figure out today. First of all, we're going to concentrate on 2 main kinds of sentences with 3 verbs. Grüß Gott, hallo, ich bin Billy Badger und das ist Baustein 3. Nun, falls du heute zum ersten Mal bei uns bist, nehmen wir hier die deutsche Sprache auseinander und zeigen, wie man sie clever und sinnvoll wieder zusammensetzt. Heute geht es um Sätze mit Modalverben. Sentences with modal verbs. Now, modal verbs are reasonably straightforward. They're easy to use in the present tense, they have fewer weird endings than other verbs, and we can use them with a whole host of action verbs that are generally going to be in the infinitive form. Let's quickly remind ourselves of how they work because we're going to need to know this before we move on. Let's take this simple example. Ich wandere am Wochenende. I hike at the weekend. Any modal verb will replace the action verb wandern and send it off to the end of the sentence in the infinitive form. Maybe, ich will am Wochenende wandern or ich soll am Wochenende wandern. But what if we already had 2 verbs in the sentence, like maybe in this example? Ich gehe am Wochenende wandern. I go hiking at the weekend, which is maybe a more usual way of talking about this activity. Now, we've already got a verb in the second position and one at the end. What do? Well, we do exactly what we did before, just ignoring that verb that's already in the final position. Our modal verb, I'm going to use möchten here. Ich möchte am Wochenende wandern gehen. I'd like to go hiking at the weekend. So that too, I think, is pretty straightforward. So let's move over into the past tense. Mostly, as you know, we're going to use the simple past tense for our modals. So we could have a sentence maybe like this. Ich musste am Wochenende einkaufen. I had to shop at the weekend. A sentence that we also might see with 3 verbs if we talk about going shopping. Ich musste am Wochenende einkaufen gehen. In each of these examples, only the modal verb is in the past tense. Now, I said we almost always use the simple past tense for modals, but it is possible to use the perfect tense. Here's how that works. Let's take this simple example. Er isst Pizza. He eats pizza. Let's add in a modal verb in the simple past tense. Er konnte Pizza essen. Changing this to the perfect tense, we replace the modal verb with the auxiliary haben in the correct form and do what we did before. Send the verb that it displaces to the end of the sentence in the infinitive form. Er hat Pizza essen können. So all this says is he could or he was able to eat pizza. Notice that the perfect tense form of the modal consists here of the auxiliary haben and the modal form in the infinitive form rather than in some kind of participle form. So this then brings us to the 2 sorts of sentences that can be, I think, kind of confusing. Take these 2. Er hätte die Pizza essen können and er kann die Pizza gegessen haben. Is there a difference between these 2? And if so, what is it? Well, one of them means he probably did eat the pizza, and one of them means he didn't, but he could have. Which one is it? Let's find out. To work this out, we'll start with the last example we looked at. Er hat die Pizza essen können. This tells us he was able to eat the pizza. Simple statement of fact. something that he was able to do in the past. Changing the auxiliary into the subjunctive form hätte tells us not that he was able to, but that he would have been able to. Maybe if some other conditions had been fulfilled. Maybe if he'd gotten home earlier or gone out to dinner with friends or that sort of thing. Let's take another example. Starting again with the perfect tense form. Sie hat das Buch lesen müssen. She had to read the book. Remember, this is the same as sie musste das Buch lesen. Changing this into the subjunctive form, we have sie hätte das Buch lesen müssen. Typical for the subjunctive, this tells us not that she had to read the book, but that she would have had to read the book if some other conditions perhaps had been fulfilled, maybe if she'd had enough time. Or replacing müssen with wollen, we end up with sie hätte das Buch lesen wollen. She would have wanted to read the book. In other words, she didn't, but she would have wanted to. So using modals like this introduces a hypothetical situation in the past. But what about those other sentences where the modal verb is in the second place? For example, what does this mean? Kann die Pizza gegessen haben. To understand what's going on here, we can remove the modal verb, which gives us this. Hat die Pizza gegessen. Okay, simple. He ate the pizza. Adding back in the modal verb introduces doubt that this is true. Kann die Pizza gegessen haben. He can, or he could maybe, have eaten the pizza. It's possible that he ate the pizza. We don't know for sure. This is not a hypothetical, but a possibility. Using other modal verbs changes how sure we are that it happened. If we're almost totally sure, then we can use the verb müssen. Muss die Pizza gegessen haben. He must have eaten the pizza. If we're a little less sure, then we can use the subjunctive form of müssen. Müsste die Pizza gegessen haben. If we're even less sure, we can use dürften. Dürfte die Pizza gegessen haben. If we're kind of 50-50 on it, then we can use können. Kann die Pizza gegessen haben. It's possible, but it's kind of 50-50. Kann die Pizza gegessen haben. If we're unsure, but it's still possible, then we can use the subjunctive form. Könnte die Pizza gegessen haben. So let's compare then our two sentences. Könnte die Pizza gegessen haben und hätte die Pizza essen können. What do these mean? Can you see the difference now? Our first one says that it is possible that he did eat the pizza, just that we're not really sure if he did. The second one tells us that he didn't, but he would have been able to, maybe if some other conditions that we don't know about had been met. So now we should be able to see what's happening here. Hätte im Lotto gewinnen müssen or muss im Lotto gewonnen haben. The first sentence, the subjunctive form, tells us again that it didn't happen, but he would have had to win lotto. Maybe in order to pay a bill or buy a house or, I don't know, go on holiday or something. But the second sentence tells us that he most likely did win lotto. It's highly possible. In fact, we're pretty sure he must have won lotto. So that's our first group of sentences with 3 verbs. In later videos, we'll meet some more. Let me know in the comments which modal verb constructions you find the trickiest. And don't forget to like and subscribe for more tips on mastering German grammar. Also danke fürs Zuschauen. Bis zum nächsten Mal. Auf Wiedersehen und tschüss.